Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Rollins. Welcome. So, regrets are something that everyone has. I think it's just part of being a human. And I was thinking about when I lived in Mexico and how the element that made it without regrets was that I learned Spanish. And so I lived in Mexico for a year and a half, and I went to a Christian. I went to a language Bible school, and then I went to a biblical leadership. What was it? Biblical studies and leadership school. So a couple different schools, and sometimes I will look back and reflect on. Um, Something I invested in school or classes or something I bought or a vacation I went on. I was like, oh, was that worth it? I think that's like a normal question. Like, was it worth my time, energy, and money to do that thing, that relationship, that thing I bought? But for Mexico, I think like, all right, there were some elements that I was like, oh, I don't know if the teaching at the leadership Bible school was as good as I would have wanted it to be, or the program was as strong as I wanted it to be, or oh, what, like, was it really worth coming down to Mexico? But just the fact alone of learning Spanish. So for a year and a half, I took the language school for 4 months, and then I learned Spanish at the church that I was at, and became fluent. I've used it in teaching. I'm using it right now in my job as a freight broker, in my freight consulting business. Where I speak to drivers that are in Spanish, or I have businesses that speak Spanish, and so it's been a huge asset. And so I think about regrets of that's something that like being fully immersed in Spanish. I have zero regrets about moving to Mexico and living there and learning Spanish. And had it not been for learning Spanish, there might be a more critical element like, was that worth a year and a half of my life? And so that's my thought on that. And so I'm wondering, what are those things in life that make an experience like absolutely without regret, where um, maybe it's like, oh man, I might regret college and my degree, but the relationships that I had are make that time so 100% worth it. And so I'm curious what those things are for you, that you had an experience or did something or invested in something. You're like, oh, through one lens, there might be a critical analysis of, was this thing worth it? But through the other, the outcome and the results make this totally worth it. So that's my thought.